It was a bright, sunny afternoon in the small town of Greenfield. The streets were busy with people going about their day shopping, talking, and enjoying the warm weather. Cars honked in the distance, and children laughed as they played in the park nearby. Birds chirped from the trees, filling the air with cheerful sounds. Among the crowd, Emily Dawson walked slowly but confidently. She held onto the leash of her guide dog, Max, who led her carefully through the busy sidewalk. Emily had a calm and peaceful look on her face. She trusted Max completely. They had been together for a long time, and he always made sure she was safe. Emily was blind, but that never stopped her from living her life. She knew the town well: the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the sound of the fountain in the town square, and the feel of the warm sunshine on her skin. To most people, Emily was just another blind woman, quietly walking with her dog. They saw her as gentle and harmless, someone who needed help. But what they didn't know was that Emily's dog, Max, was no ordinary guide dog. He wasn't just there to help her cross streets or find doors. Max had a secret. A big one. Before Max became Emily's guide, he had a very different life. A life full of action and danger. Max was once part of an elite special forces team. He was trained to do things most dogs could never dream of. He could track down people, detect danger, and even protect others from harm. Max had worked with soldiers and had been in dangerous situations many times. He was smart, strong, and quick. But now, Max's past was hidden beneath his calm and friendly face. Nobody in Greenfield knew who he really was. To them, he was just a helpful dog, walking beside Emily every day. If only they knew the truth. As Emily and Max walked down the sidewalk, people around them smiled politely. Some moved aside to give them space, while others simply went about their day, not paying much attention. Emily could hear the footsteps of people passing by, the rustle of shopping bags, and the ringing of a bell as someone entered a nearby store. A little boy tugged on his mother's hand and whispered, "Look, Mom. A blind lady with a dog." His mother smiled and nodded. "Yes, sweetie. That's a guide dog. He helps her walk safely." Emily overheard the conversation and smiled. She had heard similar words many times before. People often thought of Max as just a helper, and that was fine with her. She didn't need them to know everything. Max, walking beside her, stayed alert. His ears twitched at every little sound, and his sharp eyes scanned the area. Even though his job now was to guide Emily, his training never left him. He was always ready, just in case. Emily gently squeezed Max's leash and whispered, "Good boy, Max." Max's tail wagged slightly, but he remained focused. He knew his job and took it seriously. As they continued walking, Emily thought about how much her life had changed since she got Max. Before him, things were much harder. She used a cane to find her way, but it wasn't the same. Max gave her confidence. With him, she felt safe and free. Emily had lost her sight a few years ago in an accident. It had been a tough time, and she had to learn how to do everything differently. But Max made things easier. From the moment she met him, she knew he was special. His warm brown eyes were kind, and he had a way of understanding her feelings without words. But what she didn't know at first was just how special Max truly was. It wasn't until she brought him home that she started noticing little things. One night, soon after she got Max, Emily accidentally knocked over a glass in the kitchen. It shattered loudly, and before she could react, Max was already at her side, standing protectively in front of her. His body was tense, and he was listening carefully, as if expecting danger. Another time, when she took him to the park, a man nearby started arguing with someone. The voices got louder, and Max immediately positioned himself in front of Emily, his ears perked up and his eyes locked on the stranger. The man soon left, but Emily couldn't help but wonder, how did Max know to protect her like that? Curious, she did some research and found out that Max had been trained by the military before becoming a guide dog. He had worked with soldiers, searching for hidden dangers and protecting people in dangerous places. When his time in the military ended, he was given to a guide dog program where he was trained to help people like Emily. Learning Max's past made Emily feel even closer to him. She wasn't just walking with a dog, she was walking with a hero. As they reached the town square, Emily heard the fountain gushing water, a sound she loved. She paused for a moment, enjoying the peacefulness. But Max stood still beside her, his ears twitching again. Something had caught his attention. Emily could feel the change in his posture. "What is it, Max?" she asked softly. Max didn't bark or move, but Emily could tell he was on high alert. She knew better than to ignore him. Max never acted this way unless something was wrong. Taking a deep breath, Emily held onto his leash tightly. "Okay, boy. Let's go." With Max leading the way, they started moving again, but this time, Emily felt a little more aware. She trusted Max with everything, and if he thought something was off, she believed him. Little did she know, someone was watching her from across the street. A group of bikers leaned against their motorcycles, laughing and whispering to each other. They looked tough and mean, wearing black leather jackets and sunglasses. One of them pointed toward Emily and said, "Look at that. A blind girl and her little dog." Another laughed. "I bet she's helpless without him." They all chuckled, not knowing the truth. Not knowing that Emily's dog was not just a pet, but a highly trained protector. As Emily walked away, Max glanced in their direction for just a second, his eyes sharp and focused. It was almost as if he knew trouble was coming. Emily, unaware of the bikers, kept walking toward home, trusting Max to lead her safely. And Max? He was ready for anything. Emily walked calmly down the sidewalk, feeling the warm sun on her face. She held Max's leash tightly, trusting him to guide her safely. The streets were busy with people talking, cars passing by, and the soft sound of birds chirping in the trees. Everything seemed normal, just another day in Greenfield. But suddenly, the loud roar of motorcycles filled the air. The sound was deep and growling, like a wild animal ready to pounce. Emily could feel the vibrations in the ground beneath her feet as the bikes zoomed past. Max slowed down slightly, his ears twitching. He was always aware of everything around them. A group of bikers had entered the street, their shiny black leather jackets and dark helmets making them look tough and scary. They laughed loudly, their voices cutting through the noise of the town. As they passed by Emily, they looked at each other and exchanged grins. One of them, with a rough voice, called out, "Hey, lady. Need a ride?" His voice was teasing and full of mockery. Emily ignored him and kept walking. Max continued guiding her, his steps steady and careful. She had heard rude comments before. People sometimes said unkind things, but she had learned to stay calm and not respond. But these bikers were different. They were not going to leave so easily. Instead of driving away, they slowed down and circled back. The loud rumble of their engines surrounded her. Emily could hear their laughter growing louder. They were enjoying this. One of them, a man with a deep, mean voice, sneered, "What's the matter? Can't see where you're going." His words were cruel, and the others laughed even louder. Emily kept her head high and took a deep breath. Max, sensing her tension, walked a little closer to her side. His ears perked up, and his body stiffened slightly. He was paying close attention now, watching the bikers with sharp eyes. The bikers revved their engines, making the noise even louder. Emily could feel the wind from their bikes as they moved around her. Some people nearby watched but did not step in. Others walked away quickly, not wanting to get involved. Max's nose twitched, and he let out a low, warning growl. It was soft, but enough to let Emily know he was ready to protect her if needed. She reached down and gently patted his head. "It's okay, Max," she whispered, even though deep inside, she wasn't so sure. She had faced rude people before, but these bikers felt different. They weren't just teasing, they wanted to scare her. But what they didn't know was that Max wasn't just any dog. He wasn't just trained to help her walk. He had a past that no one in this town knew about. Max had been part of an elite special forces team. He had been trained for dangerous missions, to protect, to fight, and to stay calm under pressure. He had been in places where danger was everywhere. And even though he now looked like a simple guide dog, his instincts were still sharp. Emily could feel Max's muscles tensing under his fur. He was waiting, watching, ready for whatever might happen next. The bikers had no idea who they were messing with. One of the bikers, wearing a red bandana, got off his bike and walked toward Emily. His heavy boots clunked against the pavement. "Hey, lady," he said with a smirk. "Where you headed? Maybe we can help." Emily took a deep breath and held Max's leash tighter. She didn't say anything. She just kept walking, hoping they would get bored and leave. But the man didn't stop. He walked beside her, his voice teasing and mean. "Oh, come on. We're just trying to be friendly." His friends laughed again from their bikes. Max stepped in front of Emily slightly, placing himself between her and the man. His ears were standing straight, and his dark eyes locked onto the biker. He let out another low growl, this time a little louder. The biker paused, looking down at Max. "Whoa there, puppy," he said, stepping back a little. "Looks like your little doggy doesn't like me." He laughed, but there was a nervous edge in his voice now. Emily finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Please leave us alone," she said. The biker's smile faded a little, and he looked back at his friends. "Come on, guys, let's get out of here," one of them said. "It's just a blind girl and her dog." Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her face calm. She knew Max was watching, ready to protect her if things got worse. The leader of the bikers shrugged and got back on his motorcycle. "Whatever," he muttered. "You're not worth our time anyway." The engines roared to life again, and one by one, the bikers sped off down the street, their loud noise slowly fading away. Emily let out a small sigh of relief, but she didn't relax just yet. She reached down and ran her fingers through Max's fur, feeling his steady heartbeat. "Good boy, Max," she whispered. Max licked her hand gently and wagged his tail just a little. People around them slowly went back to their own business. Some had watched the scene with worried looks, but no one had stepped in. That was how it often was. People didn't always help, but Emily had learned to rely on herself and on Max. As they continued walking, Emily thought about what had just happened. She knew this wouldn't be the last time someone tried to bother her. But she also knew one thing for sure: Max would always be there to protect her. The bikers thought she was weak, but they didn't know the truth. They didn't know that Max wasn't just an ordinary guide dog. As they approached the park, Emily smiled a little. She wasn't afraid anymore. With Max by her side, she could face anything. And somewhere in the distance, the sound of motorcycle engines faded into nothing. Emily kept walking, holding Max's leash tightly. She could hear the bikers behind her, their engines growling like angry beasts. The loud noise made her heart race, but she kept her face calm. She knew Max was by her side, and that made her feel safe. The bikers weren't done teasing her. They rode their motorcycles closer, circling around her like hungry wolves. The roar of their engines was deafening. One of them revved his engine loudly, making the sound echo through the street. Emily flinched slightly, but she didn't stop. She had learned long ago to keep moving, no matter what people said or did. Suddenly, Max stopped. His strong body stiffened, and he stood right in front of Emily, blocking her from the bikers. Emily could feel the tension in Max's leash. He was alert now, watching every move the bikers made. His ears stood up, and his eyes were fixed on the group. One of the bikers laughed, stepping off his bike and walking toward her. His boots clunked heavily on the pavement. "Is that mud supposed to scare us?" he sneered. His friends laughed behind him, watching the scene unfold. Emily gently placed her hand on Max's back. She could feel his muscles tight under her fingers. She gave him a gentle pat, brushing his collar lightly. A tiny smile appeared on her lips, though no one could see it. She spoke softly but firmly, "I wouldn't get too close if I were you." The biker smirked, not taking her seriously. "Oh yeah," he said, stepping closer. "And what's he gonna do, huh? Bark at me?" His voice was filled with arrogance, and his friends cheered him on from their bikes. Max's deep brown eyes stayed locked on the man. His body didn't move, but his tail was still, and his ears were pointed straight. Emily knew what this meant. Max was ready. She took a deep breath and stood her ground. The biker reached out, his hand moving toward Max's leash. But before he could touch it, Max sprang into action. With a sharp, loud bark, he lunged forward, stopping just inches from the man. His bark echoed through the street, powerful and commanding. The biker stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. He hadn't expected that. The street suddenly felt quiet. The other bikers, who had been laughing moments ago, now sat frozen on their bikes. Max didn't move, but his growl rumbled low in his throat, a clear warning to anyone who tried to get closer. Emily's voice was calm, but there was a quiet strength in it. "Max isn't just any dog," she said. "He's trained to protect me, and trust me, you don't want to find out how." The leader of the bikers tried to laugh it off, but his voice was shaking. "Oh, come on, it's just a dog," he said, stepping back further. But Emily could hear the nervousness in his tone. He was starting to realize that Max was not just a pet. Max stood still, watching every move. His eyes followed the biker closely. The way he stood, firm and ready, made it clear that he was no ordinary dog. Another biker, sitting on his motorcycle, spoke up, "Hey man, let's just go. It's not worth it." He didn't seem so confident anymore. The leader frowned, embarrassed in front of his friends. He looked at Max again, then at Emily. "Whatever," he muttered. "We were just joking around." He turned and walked back to his bike, trying to act cool, but Emily could hear the quickness of his steps. Max watched them carefully as they started their engines again. He didn't move from his spot until they were far down the street. Only when the last biker disappeared from sight did he finally relax. Emily felt his body soften, and she let out a quiet sigh of relief. She knelt down beside Max and rubbed his fur gently. "Good boy, Max," she whispered, smiling. "You did great." A few people who had been watching from nearby started clapping softly. One older woman walked up to Emily and said, "That was incredible. Your dog is amazing." Emily smiled and nodded. "Yes, he is," she said proudly. "Max always takes care of me." The older woman patted Max gently. "You're lucky to have him." Emily stood up and nodded. "I know." As she and Max continued their walk, Emily felt stronger than ever. The bikers had thought she was weak, but they were wrong. Max had shown them that she wasn't alone. With Max by her side, she could face anything. As they walked through the park, Emily thought back to the day she first got Max. She remembered how nervous she was, wondering if she could take care of a guide dog. But Max had proven to be more than just a helper. He was a protector, a friend, and her greatest source of strength. Emily reached down and scratched Max behind his ears. "Thanks for always being here, buddy," she said softly. Max wagged his tail happily and licked her hand, as if to say, "I've got your back, always." The sun shone brightly above them, and the sounds of the park filled the air: children laughing, birds singing, and the gentle rustling of leaves. The world felt safe again, and Emily knew that no matter what challenges came her way, she and Max would face them together. And as for those bikers, Emily was sure they would think twice before messing with her or any other blind person ever again. The bikers laughed nervously after Emily spoke. They thought she was joking. "Yeah, right," one of them said, smirking. "A little guide dog like that. Special forces. Give me a break." Another biker chuckled and crossed his arms. "Lady, you're funny," he said, shaking his head. "That dog can barely walk straight, let alone take down anyone." Emily stayed calm. She didn't say anything else. She just stood there with her hand resting on Max's back. She could feel his body tense under her touch. She knew Max was ready. He wasn't scared. He was waiting. One of the bikers, the biggest one with a leather vest, took a step closer. He reached out his hand, pretending like he was going to grab Max's leash. "Let's see what this mutt can do," he sneered. But before he could even get close, Max moved. In a flash, he sprang forward and stood right in front of Emily. His growl was low and deep, a sound that sent shivers down the bikers' spines. His sharp eyes locked onto the biker, his muscles tight and ready. The biker's hand froze in midair. "Whoa," he mumbled, stepping back quickly. Max didn't let up. His stance was strong, his ears pointed forward, his growl growing louder. It was a warning. A clear one. Another biker tried to laugh it off. "Relax, it's just a dog," he said. But his voice didn't sound so sure anymore. Then, in a blink of an eye, Max lunged forward. His strong jaws clamped onto the leather strap of one of the motorcycles parked nearby. With a powerful pull, he yanked it down, sending it crashing onto the pavement with a loud clang. The sound echoed through the street, making everyone jump. The bikers gasped in shock. "What the?" The leader's mouth fell open. "No way, that dog just..." He couldn't even finish his sentence. The group stared in disbelief. Max stood next to the fallen bike, his eyes locked onto them, his body still and steady. He wasn't panting. He wasn't wagging his tail. He was serious. He was ready for more if they dared to try anything else. "Your dog's a freak," one of the bikers shouted, scrambling back. He looked at Max with wide, frightened eyes. Emily tilted her head slightly and smiled. Her voice was steady and calm. "Max served with the special forces before he became my guide," she said, gently rubbing his fur. "He's saved lives, disarmed threats, and taken down enemies twice your size. Still want to test him?" The bikers exchanged nervous glances. The confident smirks they had just minutes ago were gone. Their faces were now pale, their eyes darting around, looking for a way out. One biker, still staring at the fallen motorcycle, whispered, "This ain't worth it, man. Let's get out of here." Another nodded quickly. "Yeah. I'm not messing with that dog." The leader, trying to act tough, swallowed hard, and took a step back. "Whatever," he muttered, his voice shaking. "Let's go, guys." Slowly, they climbed back onto their bikes, not daring to get too close to Max. Their hands trembled as they started their engines. The once loud bikers, full of jokes and teasing, were now quiet and cautious. Max stood his ground, watching them closely, making sure they left. As the bikers sped off down the street, Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. But she didn't show it. She stayed standing tall, her hands still resting on Max. She could feel his heart beating strong under her palm. He was calm now, his job done. A small crowd had gathered nearby, watching the whole thing. A woman in a red dress gasped, "Did you see that? That dog is amazing." An older man with a cane nodded. "Never seen anything like it," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. Emily smiled gently and knelt down beside Max. She scratched behind his ears and whispered, "Good boy, Max. You did great." Max wagged his tail slightly and licked